What if I told you that the most ordinary fruit in your kitchen, a fruit so cheap you barely think before tossing it into your grocery cart, once controlled? Presidents toppled, governments started wars, and redrew the borders of entire nations. What if I told you that the humble banana, something we buy for $1 a bunch, helped create dictators, fueled CIA coups, and built one of the most powerful corporations the world had ever seen? And what if the banana was not just a snack or a harmless tropical import, but a weapon, an instrument of economic extraction, political domination, and corporate greed? Today, we dive into a story that sounds absurd, almost fictional, yet it shaped the destiny of an entire region. A story of railroads, plantations, propaganda, covert operations, and the quiet question that historians still struggle to answer. How did bananas break Latin America? To understand how a fruit became an empire, we must step back into the late 1800s. A period of rapid industrial growth, expanding global trade, and a United States hungry for new markets. Steamships had revolutionized transportation. Refrigeration was improving, and in American cities, a new exotic curiosity had appeared. The banana, cheap, sweet, easy to eat, and easy to sell. Bananas quickly gained popularity among the working class. But getting bananas from Central America to New York before they spoiled required more than demand. It required infrastructure, efficiency, and ruthless business strategy. This opportunity attracted to men whose ambitions would shape Latin America's fate. Minor C. Keith, an American railroad tycoon, and Andrew Preston, a Boston businessman who co-founded the United Fruit Company. Keith built railroads in Costa Rica, but when the government failed to pay him, it compensated him with vast tracts of prime agricultural land, the perfect soil for bananas. Preston, meanwhile, built a business that specialized in importing tropical fruit. When their interests merged, they created a corporation so large, so wealthy, and so politically connected that people across Central America called it El Pulpo the Octopus. Its tentacles touched everything: land, labor, shipping, railroads, politicians, and even the press. By the early 1900s, the United Fruit Company controlled hundreds of thousands of acres in Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Colombia. It owned private rail networks, its own ports, and the largest private navy in the Western Hemisphere, known as the Great White Fleet. What began as a fruit business was quickly evolving into something else: a shadow government. With weak national institutions, corrupt elites, and economies desperate for cash, Central American nations proved vulnerable to United Fruit's influence. The company offered jobs, railroads, and foreign investment. In return, it demanded land concessions, tax exemptions, and political obedience. This was the birth of the Banana Empire, an empire that thrived not by growing fruit, but by controlling nations. The rise of the Banana Empire followed a simple formula: acquire land, build infrastructure, secure political protection, and maximize profits. Governments granted United Fruit long-term land leases in exchange for railroad construction. But those railroads were designed not to connect cities or develop the nation. They were built purely to transport bananas to coastal ports. Villages were displaced. Small farmers were pushed aside. Traditional crops were abandoned. United Fruit quickly evolved from a fruit importer into a territorial superpower. It controlled everything from the soil to the shipping routes. Soon, its executives realized something profound. In weak states, corporate wealth could become political power. If a government interfered with profits, it could be pressured. If a politician threatened land reform, he could be replaced. And in places where democracy was fragile, replacing leaders was surprisingly easy. Honduras became the first true example of this dynamic. In the early 1900s, Honduras suffered chronic political instability and crushing national debt. United Fruit and its rival companies saw opportunity. By funding rival political factions, they secured tax breaks, eliminated labor regulations, and acquired even more land. The companies did not care who ruled Honduras. They only cared that whoever ruled protected their interests. From 1903 to 1925, Honduras experienced more than 80 different governments. Presidents rose and fell with corporate approval. The phrase Banana Republic was born not as a joke, but as an accurate description. A country whose political and economic systems were controlled by a foreign corporation, not its own people. Yet even as instability spread across the region, the worst was still to come. The true breaking point would occur in Guatemala. Guatemala held the heart of the Banana Empire. By the 1930s, United Fruit controlled almost half of Guatemala's arable land. Every major port, the telegraph system, and the entire national railway network. It was the largest employer in the country. A dictator, Jorge Ubico, ruled Guatemala with an iron fist and ensured United Fruit faced no taxes, no labor rights, and no challenges. But history does not stand still. In 1944, after decades of repression, Guatemalans overthrew Ubico in a peaceful revolution and established a democratic government. For the first time in its modern history, Guatemala had elected leaders who wanted to reduce foreign influence and lift the country out of poverty. When Jacobo Arbenz became president in 1951, he introduced land reforms to break up unused plantations and give land to poor farmers. Crucially, much of this unused land belonged to United Fruit. The company was not losing money, but it feared something far more dangerous: the idea that a Latin American nation could reclaim its economic autonomy. United Fruit's response was not negotiation, it was a PR war. The company launched an unprecedented propaganda campaign in the United States, portraying Arbenz as a communist threat during the height of the Red Scare. This narrative found powerful supporters. Both the Secretary of State and the CIA. Director John Foster Dulles and Alan Dulles had previously worked for the law firm, representing United Fruit. Whether motivated by ideology, business connections, or Cold War paranoia, the U.S. government approved a covert operation to overthrow Arbenz. The mission was codenamed PB Success. In 1954, the CIA armed rebels ran psychological warfare on Guatemalan radio frequencies, flew fake bombing raids, and created the illusion of a massive uprising. Arbenz resigned under pressure, and a military dictatorship replaced him. United Fruit regained its land. Guatemala lost its democracy. And what followed was catastrophic: a civil war lasting 36 years, with more than 200,000 deaths, mass displacement, and generations of trauma, all stemming from land inequality and foreign intervention, triggered by bananas. The fallout spread far beyond Guatemala. Across Central America, economies became dangerously dependent on a single crop. When diseases like Panama disease ravaged plantations, entire nations collapsed economically. Governments grew weaker, corruption deepened, and foreign interference became a constant threat. Social inequality widened as land remained concentrated in the hands of multinational corporations and local elites. In many cases, the best farmland was reserved for export crops, while local populations struggled with food insecurity. Violence escalated as marginalized groups rebelled against systems that denied them land and political voice. Countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, and Colombia faced decades of unrest, driven partly by the structural inequality the banana economy created. Attempts to break free from this model failed repeatedly. Governments tried nationalizing land, imposing taxes, and promoting economic diversification. Yet they faced severe obstacles. Infrastructure was controlled by foreign companies, making independence costly. Global market pressures punished countries that attempted reforms. If wages rose or taxes increased, United Fruit simply shifted operations to nations with more compliant governments. Diseases destroyed monoculture crops, exposing how vulnerable these economies had become. And the Cold War ensured that any left-leaning policy risked being labeled communist, inviting foreign intervention. Honduras remained trapped in this cycle for decades, dependent on banana exports, devastated by hurricanes, destabilized by political turmoil, and unable to build a sustainable economy. The structural damage created by the banana empire was not temporary, it was generational. What makes this history even more unsettling is how familiar it feels. The patterns that emerged in the banana era are still visible today. Consider avocados in Mexico, where cartels extort farmers and hijack a valuable export crop, or cocoa production in West Africa, where child labor and corporate dependence mirror early 20th century plantation economies. Look at lithium in South America, the mineral essential for electric vehicle batteries. Global powers and multinational corporations are already battling for influence over salt flats in Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. Palm oil in Southeast Asia has triggered deforestation and community displacement. Cobalt mining in the Congo fuels modern technology but relies on unsafe labor conditions and political instability. The products have changed, the corporations have changed, but the pattern remains the same. When a poor nation becomes dependent on a single export controlled by foreign companies, inequality grows, political instability follows, and sovereignty erodes. So how did bananas break Latin America? They did it by demonstrating how easily a powerful corporation can dominate a weak state. They did it by turning land into monopoly, labor into dependency, and politics into an outsourced function of foreign profit. They did it by transforming Central America into a region where economies rose and fell with the price of a fruit, where presidents were made and unmade by business interests, and where the promise of democracy was repeatedly crushed by external forces. And they did it by creating cycles of inequality and instability that continue to shape the region to this day. There are 3 lessons we must take from this history. First, a single crop can destroy a country. When an economy depends on one export, it becomes fragile, vulnerable to disease, storms, price fluctuations, and political pressure. Second, corporations can become more powerful than governments. When a private company owns land, infrastructure, and political connections, it can override democratic decisions. And finally, history repeats when we ignore it. The banana republic model is not a relic of the past. It reappears wherever wealth, power, and weak governance collide. The story of how bananas broke Latin America is not just a tragedy from a century ago. It is a mirror held up to our world today. It is a warning about the cost of economic dependency, the dangers of corporate influence, and the long-term consequences of trading stability for short-term profit. So the next time you pick up a banana, or an avocado, or a smartphone with a lithium battery, remember the hidden history behind these everyday products. If we do not learn from the past, we may repeat it in new forms. And if this story opened your eyes to the deeper forces shaping global economics, then like this video, share it, and subscribe for more content that uncovers how the world truly works. Because the world does not run on money, it runs on consequences.